Welcome. Bienvenidos to the 2024 Blaney Lecture on Contemporary Poetry and Poetics, Making the Invisible Visible, Some Thoughts on Poetry and Science with Jane Hirshfield, former Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets. I am Ricardo Alberto Maldonado, the Academy's President and Executive Director. The Blaney Lecture was established in memory of former board member Dorothy Gulbenkian Blaney, past president of Cedar Crest College and champion of women and education. We're grateful to her estate for initiating this distinguished lecture series some 14 years ago. We're also grateful to the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the New York State Council on the Arts, and viewers like you for helping us share today's talk with viewers in New York City, New York State, and also far and wide. For 90 years, the Academy of American Poets has been a home for the meaningful communion between poets and readers. Through programs and publications, including poets.org, the largest publicly funded poetry website in the world, we champion the work of poets from our past and in our present, stewarding the possibility that poetry brings to our communities in the future. We build together a poetry continuum along with the support of our visionary board of directors and board of chancellors, a distinguished group of poets who serve as artistic advisors to the Academy and ambassadors of poetry to the nation at large. Our featured speaker, Jane Hirshfield, is author of numerous books of poetry, including her most recent, The Asking, New and Selected Poems. Her honors include induction into the American Academy of Arts and Letters, as well as fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the 70th Academy of American Poets Fellowship for Distinguished Poetic Achievement. She is that rare thing in contemporary American life, a true person of letters, wrote former Chancellor Kay Ryan. She demonstrates in every possible way that this life matters. Before you grab a hold of your notebook and pencil, a bit about format. As you know, Ms. Hirshfield will be lecturing on poems and science as tools for making visible what has always been there to be seen. If you have any questions for Ms. Hirshfield, please write them down and email them to us by March 29th, 2024 at events@poets.org. We'll be sharing responses along with the recording of today's lecture in the coming weeks. Again, the email is events@poets.org. And now please join me in welcoming Jane Hirshfield.
Thank you. First, my gratitude to the Academy for everything that it does, for the honor of asking me to give the Blaney Lecture this year, and also my thanks to all of you who are listening. To speak about making the invisible visible, I'm going to begin with invisibility itself. In some Borgesian universe, a thesaurus of the invisible must exist, a periodic table of the imperceptible in all its weights, meanings, variations. I can't give you Borges' library. Borges himself could only point towards it. We can admire together a few of his entries. From the poem Things That Might Have Been, The Unicorn's Other Horn. From Boundaries, a line by Verlaine I will not remember again. From The Other Tiger, the other tiger, the one not in this poem. It was some time after I'd written this paragraph that I thought to remember that Borges was blind. Vision isn't made only by the eyes. A thought of Stephen Hawking comes also to mind. To ask what happened before the Big Bang is like asking what happens north of the North Pole. Some of the things that can't be made visible: non-existence itself, what cannot be even imagined, what lives past perception. One more invisible thing beyond pointing: the fullness of reality itself, which does exist but can't ever be seen. There's too much of it in too many directions at once. And yet we keep trying to approach it, trying with imagination, instrument, and experiment to see more, understand more, to know more precisely, and feel more warmly, or sometimes coldly, what we are already part of. Trying sometimes also to change or add something to it, however we can, to add something, change something in ourselves. There's something else standing almost not entirely invisibly behind my wanting to look at our looking, wanting to understand better what we see and what we don't. The divisions, griefs, and kinship blindness of our current era. How much and how quickly we need to find a way to see more, understand more, add or subtract or change something however we can in the world, in ourselves. I keep feeling that more understanding would help. I know it may not. Art and science both begin with seeing, with observation and description, and with the pointing past the observable world that the observable world makes possible. But to see in ways that matter past the immediate moment, you need something else to preserve perception. What's seen but not given a form retrievable to memory vanishes back into reality's blowing, invisible dust. Roughly halfway between the discovery of the double helix and the start of the project to map everything in our own, the Human Genome Nomenclature Committee was formed and set out some guidelines. Ideally, gene symbols are short, memorable, and pronounceable. Names should be brief, specific, and convey something about the character or function of the gene products, but not attempt to describe everything known. I hear in that set of suggestions something not unlike the naming that happens inside the body of a lyric poem. A meaningful image, symbol, music, sentence is found to summon with memorable brevity an unsayable whole. To write or read the words that became Robert Hayden's Those Winter Sundays is to give something otherwise unholdable a holdable shape and a way it can be returned to and looked at more. The namings and seeing of art and science are not the same. Science, one friend wrote in an email, is a collective endeavor to learn what is true about the world, no matter who we are or where we are, no matter what we would like to believe. Scientific conventions for naming are meant to hold shared, specific, and also limitless meaning available to anyone who needs to draw from or add to science's systematic knowing. Felis sylvestris catus sets house cat into biology's ordering: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Poetry names cats differently and looks at a cat at all for different reasons. Poetry's naming, and by this I don't mean its titles, summons sometimes catness, but more usually a cat who has some reason for being named in a poem. Here, for instance, are 10 lines of Christopher Smart's Cat, from a poem of over 1200 and almost 3 centuries old. For first he looks upon his forepaws to see if they are clean. For secondly, he kicks up behind to clear away there. For thirdly, he works it upon stretch with the forepaws extended. For fourthly, he sharpens his paws by wood. For fifthly, he washes himself. For sixthly, he rolls upon wash. For seventhly, he flees himself, that he may not be interrupted upon the beat. For eighthly, he rubs himself against a post. For ninthly, he looks up for his instructions. For tenthly, he goes in quest of food. What is named in these lines is the joy and specificity of being a cat. But also because this is a poem, and poems name things beyond their immediate boundaries, there's something more. To put into the parallel structure and music of the King James Bible a description of fleas, post rubs, and kicking up behind erases the distinction between ordinary cat and the holy. We remember the poem for the cat, but the cat holds the holy. Another naming of Felis sylvestris catus is in Carl Sandburg's Fog, a poem that anyone of my generation learned in childhood. I have no idea if it's still being taught or given. It's a cat that isn't a cat at all, and yet has been made in this poem so visible that it is one. Fog. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. This is a different mode of seeing and of naming, a single extended metaphor of fewer than 24 words. Yet in it, fog is made seen, a whole city is somehow impossibly made seen, and a cat. The poem is almost weightless, brief, yet not quick, fog-like. Its reticence carries some silence, a portion of mystery. We have no explanation for why it is here. It is also faithful to what we know of cats. They come and go as they like, to remind us the world does. I feel whenever I read it one more thing, the way that this poem, by its very simplicity, makes visible its own stage magic. The trick is that something, anything, a cat, a poem, fog, can be so easily conjured out of thin air. Next, a different example of increasing the visible by its naming. It holds the meeting of science's naming and poetry's in 3 resonant phrases. The first is a phrase less widely known, but it gave this whole talk its title, the invisible present. In 1983, freshwater zoologist John J. Magnuson saw something not entirely unseen, but not recognized in the way ecological research was then being planned and funded in short-term cycles. What he saw was that changes that happen outside of certain speeds and timeframes go unperceived. We hear but don't see a hummingbird's wings. Whether or not a galloping horse has all 4 hooves off the ground at once was a question that couldn't be answered until Edward Muybridge was able to look in 1878 with the help of a camera. A glacier is large, and eyes that see at the scale of a glacier don't recognize centimeters less of it per year. A river without fish is only a river without fish if you know how abundantly many once were there. To see these things and their causes, you need to change how you are looking. You need also some tool to evade immediate time, even if only a notebook and pencil. Magnuson's invisible present was the timescale of acid deposition and species degradation, of the arrival of synthetic chemicals and plastics and their effects recognized only later. He called it the 3 or 4 generations in which a person's own responsibility to the planet is most clear. The recognition is now familiar, and even so, the long-term effects of any day's choices is hard to perceive and hard to hold onto or act on when human brains are biased toward the present we see. Magnuson's phrase works on awareness the way some poems do. They preserve a knowledge we can't keep in mind without help because it is knowledge we don't want to remember. The many poems, for instance, that say one way or another, you are going to die. 20 years of volunteer observations were needed to show the effect of DDT's introduction on the eggs of migratory raptors, described by the second resonant phrase I want to acknowledge, Rachel Carson's 1962 Silent Spring. The title held a predicted grief so compressed, specific, and imaginable that its 2 words became perhaps the most consequential of the 20th century. The third resonant phrase, much the same, was coined by Carl Sagan. It joined what was until then separate, the issues of war catastrophe and human-changed climate. The phrase was nuclear winter. Each of these namings held something newly perceived that needed seeing. Each led to a shift of public knowledge and public action by having brought into broader view an idea first understood by the means and tools of science, then named with the means and tools of poetry. Asking the fewest possible words to say something that matters, that without them would go unsaid or unheard. A poem is words that see and speak beyond their own horizon. When you hear Silent Spring, you don't need to be told birds are absent. The image has already summoned and then erased them. I did not want to leave out of this talk entirely that increase of seeing can be made and given in ways other than word and symbol. 2 examples. This is Dorothea Lange's famous photograph, Migrant Mother, Nipomo, California, 1936. One definition of art, beauty that transcends the circumstances of its making without leaving them out. This photograph is of and not of the past. Everything in it and that led to it continues. Migration and homelessness, the Great Depression and Dust Bowl's causes, the outcasting of workers. In it also, a mother's persistence, a photographer's persistence and seeing, a camera's seeing, and the lineage of earlier set-down images naming both Madonna and Child and Pieta. The second example is a work entirely given to making the invisible visible. It is John Cage's 4 minutes, 33 seconds. That was one passage. Cage's iconic piece makes visible first that art is a condition of attention. Then that art's attention carries with it a set of expectations, conventions, preconceptions. Then a few aspects of human nature, discomfort with uncertainty and confusion, and the social embarrassment of public uncertainty and confusion, our need to frame, our need to fill what seems empty. But because the piece keeps pointing at what it is pointing to, it has 3 movements. The piano closes the pianist closes and opens the keyboard's lid, and because we are beings who want to solve the riddle, what is this? It finally makes visible, undistracted, listened to time, and that something is always happening inside it if you pay attention. Last, that time and sound heard as music are music. For reasons of time, I'm skipping a section now about process in science and poems. You'll have to make it visible for yourselves by imagining what it says. And now I'm skipping another section, an interlude looking at invisibility and visibility making directly. This time, though, I'll give you the paragraph that starts it and then the start of its turn so you can better imagine what's missing. Tom Gunn's The Man with Night Sweats and Marie Howe's What the Living Do belong in any bibliography of the HIV/AIDS crisis. Claudia Rankine's 2015 book, Citizen, brought race in this country to a different awareness. Tracy K. Smith's Life on Mars could not have been written 60 years earlier. And still, what can be new in poems and what was new in these books' poems isn't reducible only to subject. Wilfred Owen's Dulce et decorum est didn't counter blindness to war's existence. It stripped a kind of blindness from war's seeing. We might ask what makes things invisible, whether in poetry or in science. Some possibilities. Absence needs no explanation. Distance, what is too far or sometimes too near. Location, the viewer looks elsewhere. Difference, what is so unfamiliar it isn't seen, as Captain Cook's boat wasn't seen when he first arrived in Australia. Time we've already spoken of, and the list goes on and the section goes on. Picking up the talk again now with a section on visibility made by tools. I couldn't not give you this because it lets science speak for itself in its own language. In a minute, first I speak. An instrument is anything that is instrumental, that causes something to change in the observable world or in the observing mind. In music, a piano both makes possible its own music and makes it. In poetry, a thought of Osip Mandelstam's comes to mind. For an artist, a worldview is a tool or a means, like a hammer in the hands of a mason. One way to see more is to borrow others' seeing. To see more of the instruments of science, I asked two research scientists I know if they might each describe for me a tool they've used in their work to make something visible. First is the longer ending of the email from which I took the earlier definition of science. For anyone who may not know his work, Saul Perlmutter shared the 2011 Nobel in Physics for the discovery that the universe's expansion is speeding up. Okay, now it's him for a while. It's worth thinking about just how strongly connected everything in the world is to everything else, so that even invisible things, think dark matter and dark energy, end up giving themselves away in the surprising behavior of the visible objects they are connected to. In my own work discovering the entity we now call dark energy, the giveaway to its existence was found in the appearance of galaxies we see at different distances from us that show not only what things looked like when the light left that galaxy, but also how much these appearances have been subsequently distorted, redshifted, by the expansion of the universe since then. The surprising behavior was that the inferred expansion of the universe appears to have been speeding up in the past 7 billion years. From that, we concluded that there is an otherwise invisible entity responsible, an energy source we are calling dark energy. Along the way to making this possible, we built telescopes that collect light over 10,000 times longer time intervals than our eyes do, using pupils that are 1,000,000 times bigger in area than our eyes are. We stored billions of pixels of these images containing thousands of galaxies and used computers to compare them to the images of the same parts of the sky seen 3 weeks later, thus revealing the very rare, tiny, otherwise invisible new spots of light in just a few of these galaxies that are in fact exploding stars, supernovae that act as our beacons to measure the distances and redshifts of those galaxies. And because Saul is a person always thoughtful, his email went on to end by asking a question. But what of the entities that just happen to be completely disconnected to the visible and inferred objects in the world, so they can't give themselves away? And when I say completely disconnected, I mean that their existence can't even change the complexity of a theory that we're using. We can never know anything about such entities, even in principle. Does this mean that our picture of reality can never be complete? Or perhaps that is our definition of real things, things that can be part of our reality. For a second example, I asked Mimi Cole, a marine biologist and 1990 MacArthur Fellow who works on biomechanics and is interested in life amid ocean turbulence, if she could describe a tool she's used specifically to bring something invisible into seeing. Her reply came with an image of tool-made discovery. I'm attaching a frame of a video we made using planar laser-induced fluorescence, that's the tool, to let us see the spatial distribution of odors coming from corals. Microscopic larvae of reef-dwelling sea slugs use those odors to find the reef. Before this technique, let us see on the scale encountered by microscopic animals, people thought that odors were a diffuse cloud, like smoke dispersing from a chimney. Now we know that for these tiny animals swimming in turbulent flow, odors are not a cloud. They are on-off signals. The larvae swim through fine stripes of odor to find their home. The brightness of each pixel tells us the concentration of the odor at that exact spot, and because this is a video, we can see how it changes with time. This is an example not only of seeing the invisible, but also of trying to see on the spatial scale important to the beings and processes we're trying to study. This exchange was part of a decades-long conversation about the processes of science and art, and Mimi is also a person broadly thoughtful. Entirely independently, but perhaps characteristic of the minds of certain scientists, her note also ended, as Saul's did, by turning to something further. Is there a counterpart using different breadths of vision in poetry or art to reveal something we hadn't seen before, either because we were looking too broadly and superficially, or because we had tunnel vision and failed to see the relationship to the broader world, or a bigger idea about the small thing or narrow thought in front of our nose? This list of questions holds not only their substance, and I hope I'm answering some of them in various places over the course of this talk. But reading Mimi's list, I realize there's also something to be said in thinking of tools about perception and grammar. That grammar itself is a tool, conducting in all senses of that word both how and what you can see. To change from the mind of sentence to the mind of question may be the primordial tool for seeing more. It may be that the first question is there a question that might be asked here? And the next, what is it? I noticed one more thing about Mimi's note, how physical the shifted thought is in her list of questions. The mind steps back, steps closer, looks around. It is what painters do, painting, and tree pruners, pruning, and what happens in any kind of thought for which you don't yet know the answer. You look at different levels and from different angles. You turn to face a different direction. Stymied, you leave the desk and go for a walk. Then you come back and think of more and different questions. Now I'm going back to poems and poems' ways of naming. There are kinds of knowledge in both science and poetry that can be made visible only by their enacting. Some results in science can only be found by running in full the process that finds them. Some poems' experience can be had only by rereading the poem in full. Their held understanding is so embodied in their own unfolding that it's available only to procedural memory, the way that to recall what riding a bike is like, you have to imagine riding a bike. Examples from science are impossible to give you. As examples from poetry, two that even their authors couldn't find names for. One is called Untitled, the other is titled with its first line. The first is by James Baldwin, Untitled. Lord, when you send the rain, think about it, please, a little. Do not get carried away by the sound of falling water, the marvelous light on the falling water. I am beneath that water. It falls with great force, and the light blinds me to the light. The poem speaks for itself. I will notice only how much of its saying is done through the shape on the page, and that it reminds of a Giacometti statue standing in vertical solitude under immensity's pressure. A second poem that can only be named by its own words is likely less familiar, by the New Zealand writer Janet Frame. I take into my arms more than I can bear to hold. I take into my arms more than I can bear to hold. I am toppled by the world, a creation of ladders, pianos, stairs cut into the rock, a devouring world of teeth where even the common snail eats the heart out of a forest, as you and I do, who are human at night. Yet still, I take into my arms more than I can bear to hold. If I ask myself what has been named and discovered in this unparaphrasable poem, I can only answer this poem. There are a great many things I wanted to say about it, but again, for this spoken talk, they will stay invisible. And I am skipping also now a section with quotes from photographers about photography's seeing. They're wonderful. I'm going to give you the quote that moves from that to the next. This is the literary critic Peter Brooks, who wrote the iconic reading for the plot, but these words are from a more recent book, Seduced by Story. It is connected to the invisible present idea, as is the whole section you're not hearing. The fictional allows us to discover in the space of a couple of hours what it would take us years to learn in life, or that we might not learn at all, since the profound changes in life are hidden from us by the slowness of their process. The heart changes in life. That is our worst sorrow. But we know this change only in reading. Fiction alone provides a recovery of meaning from passing time, and fictional beings are crucial to the project because their eyes allow us to see the meanings of temporal change. So that leads into a section about poems being recognized as themselves a kind of data. And it came from an article that appeared late last year in The Guardian about haiku season words and how they are now slipping out of the season they were meant to signal originally because of climate change. You won't be hearing To Haiku by Basho. Okay, so looking for where I pick up. Okay. The next part of this talk will, forgive me, be a bit of a shaggy dog story. I keep it in because it was so hard for me to figure out, and because it's about something so central to the other things in this talk. What is made seeable only by science's more objective naming, and what is made seeable only by the nameways of poems and story. It's also, and mostly, about what happens in the moment that something invisible is made visible. What lets you see that you have seen. Okay. There's an emotion that comes with discovery, a feeling that tells you you've made one. It is humanly central, and it is frequent. You see it crossing the faces of babies when some difficult puzzle is finally figured out and the larger thing is now inside the small one. Yet its thesaurus is oddly patchy. In the literal thesaurus, the physical book one, organized by Roget into concepts and realms of experience, the names scatter between entries that feel either too much of the mind or too much without it. Some entries have to do with physical perception and fall under, in Roget, organic matter. Some appear under intellect. Insight, a word that for me begins to signal the emotion of discovery as well as its recognition, is in intellect's category, formation of ideas. Something feels for me missing. Then the feeling's more emotional qualities of wonder and astonishment appear in personal emotion, which feels right. But those words seen in that way point primarily towards experience that don't include the need for a puzzle to be solved. Discovery itself, Roget's puts firmly into the mind, and most of the entries name it objectively from the outside, not by how it is felt. James Joyce brilliantly named the sense of discovery created by certain kinds of short story epiphany. Roget allocates that to religion. And then none of these words felt to me exactly what I wanted a name for. Something close to wonder, but only when making hybrid wonder's verb sense of inquiring into, I wonder, and its noun sense of amazement. Roget keeps them separate. The experience of felt recognition begins in a child, a research friend told me, around the time they turn 1. That explains one reason for language's limitation. Words often stumble at describing things that exist in us before words do. She also confirmed that in cognitive research, experience that falls between cognition and emotion is understudied because it is hard to study. I felt so much better when she told me that. I finally thought of 2 words that do hold the experience of felt discovery. In its stronger version, eureka. In its mildest form it can take and still be discovery, huh. These are words closer to poetry than science. They name by enacting the experience they describe and lie somewhere between guttural vocalization and language. I became curious about huh and what the name for it might be. When I asked friends, the first task was to sort through its multiple meanings. There is the huh, that means question or say again, the huh, that means skepticism, really, the huh, well, I think I said that wrong, I'm not a very good actress, the huh of, can't do it, of simple surprise. The huh I was after is the one I came to call penny drop, a name in itself so peculiar that its very existence is a sign of how hard it is to speak of these things. Some trace it back to 1930s newspaper vending machines and gas meters, others to 16th century candles being used as clocks, and I won't explain how that got figured. I did know that I did know that is the type of word labeled interjection, a category too broad for what I was looking for. And I knew that one of its synonyms is available only in writing, the exclamation point that tells you words are to be heard as intensified and as excitement. An Australian linguist finally gave me the name I'd been hunting. Here is the relevant section from Nicholas Evans's email. Now, on to huh. There is an interesting grammatical category in some languages called mirative, which expresses the quality of surprise. Hey, I just found this out, became aware of it. The term was coined in studies of some Balkan languages like Albanian. Then an article by Scott Delancey at University of Oregon argued that this was what a particular suffix in Tibetan did. There's been some controversy about that, but I think it's certainly a clear category in other languages like Kurtop in Bhutan, which Gwen Hislop has written about. There's just a wisp of a mention of it in my own book near the bottom of page 79, Tibetan and Safiki, but not enough to really make it clear. If you do a search on mirativity, you'll find more. If you ever go through Chicago, I'll put you in touch with a dear colleague, Victor Friedman, a Balkan specialist of great linguistic sensitivity who I'm sure you would have interesting discussions with about this. Anyway, those are just some of the languages where you do this in grammar. But as you wrote, we can do this in English with huh, hey, eureka, and other devices. For your other deeper question, whether it should be labeled as an experience of emotion or of cognition, I'm a fan of Antonio Damasio's book, Descartes' Error. I think mirativity inhabits one of the cracks between knowing and feeling, since discovering what you didn't know until just this second and now understand is like feeling the sun rise on a new day. And after rereading the last sentence I wrote, I realized yet another way English holds mirativity, when we say something dawns on you, a metaphor signal of the mirative. Mirativity, at last. There are a few other things about this email worth noticing. One is how much it embodies the looking and language of science. Nick was able to name objectively from the outside an experience recognizable to any child, but one I hadn't been able to find a way to categorize at all without having a word for it. That needed a linguist. And yet, by the email's end, wanting to convey the fullness of what he was saying, a linguist turns to the language and subjective naming of poetry, like feeling the sun rise on a new day. And by doing that, comes to another metaphor that holds the feeling of insight. What I take from this, remembering also Saul Perlmutter's and Mimi Cole's emails earlier, one tool for increase of seeing is to simply continue looking, continue writing or talking, to give thought time to keep going and see where else it might go. I've put in this email in full for another aspect of science's seeing that's visible in it. You might have thought, why is she telling us all that? The note speaks not one person's knowledge, but of what exists in a larger community of discovery and its history. Work done by one person showed this, by another showed that. Knowledge is acknowledged as being made by a community. Its discoverers are cited. And then also in this email, there's the knowledge that knowledge is made by conversation. I'm told the next person to talk to. This goes back to the opening words of the definition of science Saul Perlmutter sent me. Science is a communal activity. A truth is something both made and agreed on by many. It may be only because I've struggled so long with my question of that reading Nicholas Evans' reply was for me so mirative an experience. Mirativity, what a marvelous concept, and how astonishing to think of a meaning that can be set equally into grammatical case, punctuation mark, or word. Something both invisible to me and puzzling in how very hard it was to see had at last become visible to me by its naming. This now found word led to one last I turned to one other tool for looking at language from the outside, Partridge's etymology. Mirativity's Latin roots are in variations of the mir found in admiration, miracle, and mirror. To look, to wonder, to see. And earlier yet, in the Proto-Indo-European, which I don't know how to pronounce, smeros, S-M-E-I-R-O-S, from sme to smile. I see is another synonym for felt discovery, as is also the smile on the face of the baby after solving his problem. The happiness of seeing runs through this talk. To come back to the visual metaphor of understanding as a thing emerging from smiling, having set out by wondering about, was for me again an experience meritive. Something that had been there to see, but I hadn't. Now to return to poetry's naming, Seamus Heaney's postscript. Postscript. And sometime make the time to drive out west into County Clare along the flaggy shore in September or October, when the wind and the light are working off each other so that the ocean on one side is wild with foam and glitter, and inland among stones the surface of a slate-gray lake is lit by the earthed lightning of a flock of swans, their feathers ruffed and ruffling, white on white. Their fully grown, headstrong-looking heads tucked or cresting or busy underwater. Useless to think you'll park and capture it more thoroughly. You are neither here nor there. A hurry through which known and strange things pass, as big, soft buffetings come at the car sideways and catch the heart off guard and blow it open. I am again not saying things that I could have said about that poem. Keeping the invisible invisible is the last thing I will be talking about. There's one more way to think about this idea of making the invisible visible, which has to do with our lives' relationship to uncertainty, mystery, and unknowing. In science, making visible is the goal, to increase what can be reliably known to be true allows you to build a Webb telescope, trace the cosmos's history, live on this planet perhaps more lightly and at less expense to ourselves and its other beings. Art is the realm that gives us a way to acknowledge that uncertainty, unknowing, and mystery are not experiences that can be or should be entirely solved. The emotion Einstein felt most profound was the presence of mystery. The invisible is a reservoir we don't want completely to empty. In myths, fairy tales, folk tales, one being is hidden inside another. A prince inside a frog, a selkie in the body of a human woman. Daphne is turned into a tree, Arachne into a spider. Proteus, the god who gave proteins their names, enacts the shape-shifting that runs through every culture's stories. And I just remembered something I wanted to put in here and didn't, which is anyone interested in either just a great poem or how it thinks about these questions, please read Kenneth Koch's One Train May Hide Another. It is brilliant. It was way too long to include. Anople's Ghost, Ovid's Metamorphoses. The tropes tell us that nothing is fixed, tell us that whatever our eyes first see may not be all that's there to be seen. Under the world's visible surface, there is always another version of the story, another point of view, another invisible understanding to be found. That all our stories are provisional, partial, is an understanding scientists hold fast to. In science, a truth is a hypothesis not yet disproven. The pleasure of the Necker cube optical illusion, the drawn box you can see angled either in one direction or another and move back and forth in your mind, but never see both ways at once, is its reminder that we can be fooled, that our vision is multiple and malleable, and its hidden motto might be, "It depends," or if you are a scientist, "Is that so?" For me, this is a source of enormous hope. We who want to make things visible also want the ungraspable and invisible to exist, to know it is there, housing in one room its stories of unseen spirits and ghosts, in another, drawings by Escher, in another, the stories of Borges, in another, the immeasurability of the possible, the promise that there will always be something more to invent or to see. In her 90s, the Polish poet Julia Hartwig summoned this part of invisibility's meaning in a poem of 4 lines. Feeling the way. The most beautiful is what is still unfinished. A sky filled with stars uncharted by the astronomers. A sketch by Leonardo, a song broken off from emotion. A pencil, a brush, suspended in the air. I've known this poem for almost 20 years, but until reading it during this talk's writing, never paid much attention to something that was always there to be seen, that its title names the way a person moves when they cannot see. This poem holds not only what I had always found in it, the promise of what is still possible. It holds also a way to trust the world's present and the world's future, even in times we may find ourselves in complete darkness. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for Jane Hirschfield's Blainey lecture, Making the Invisible Visible, Some Thoughts on Poetry and Science. And thank you, Jane, for the generosity and brightness of your insight. A note to viewers and listeners, if you have any questions based on the lecture, write them down and email them to us by March 29th, 2024 at events@poets.org. Again, events@poets.org. Thank you very much.